Welcome back, everyone, to the main stage at Event Sustainability Live. Got to say, we've had some brilliant content on this stage, really insightful stuff, but I'm particularly excited about this discussion. We're looking about how smart technology is revolutionizing events from a sustainability perspective. Some of the companies represented on this panel are doing such cool things, huge admirers of what they're doing, and I'm sure we'll have a good discussion generally about how technology can help advance sustainability in the events industry. Just before we get started, I want to say another big thanks to Evolution Dome, who are sponsors for this stage and indeed for the event generally. This beautiful structure that we are standing beneath. Plenty of others around the show floor. Really great company to work with. All different types of structures that work for all different types of events, indoor and outdoor. They're actually situated just behind us there. Ash over there will be very happy to talk to anyone who's keen for a chat after the panel, so do go and say hello. We encourage questions from all of you guys, so a couple of ways you can do that. Questions of the panel. You can do it through Slido. You might have the app or slido.com. Scan that QR code, that will get you into the session. You just submit questions through your phone, they'll appear on this screen, and the panel will tackle them in good time. Very simple. If you prefer the old-fashioned way, we also have a roaming mic, so stick your hand up. We'll come round and get you a mic if you want to ask questions that way. But without further ado, delighted to hand over to Chrissy, who's going to be moderating this panel on sustainable tech. Chrissy.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Chrissy Beck. I am an event sustainability consultant at Worlds Better. Really pleased to be here today. I'm stepping in for a colleague of mine who is struggling with the trains, as I was yesterday. I was supposed to be speaking over there yesterday, but ended up getting shuffled to today. So you're going to have to bear with me because I'm standing in at the last minute, but I also do know quite a lot about everyone on this panel, and it's a real privilege to be here to talk to each of them and to reveal a lot about what they're doing in this space, which is really exciting. So yeah, today's panel is Sustainable Innovations, How Tech is Revolutionizing Events. And as event organizers, we use tech day to day in lots of different areas of what we're doing, for registration, for presenting, for analyzing audience data. It's becoming an essential part of what we do anyway, but it's becoming an essential part of understanding how we can be operating more sustainably. So I'm joined today by some fascinating people who are doing some really exciting cutting-edge things in technology. So I'm going to hand over to them each to just introduce themselves and describe a little bit about their role at the business that they work for and the tech that they are responsible for. So let's go to Malcolm.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Malcolm Leach, I'm the CTO for Isla, and we've got a platform called Trace. So Isla in general is about getting the whole events industry to a sustainable future. Trace is a platform that we've developed which lets you record and report on your carbon emissions. At the moment it's recording and reporting. In the future we hope to make it much more of a kind of ecosystem of a platform where you can actually find more sustainable solutions via the platform as you're going through your event planning stage. I do feel like that was a great introduction by Chrissy, although I'm new to the events industry. I only started at ILO at the start of February this year, so I've come from various different other sectors, like fintech, etc. And so a lot of this is kind of new to me, but technology, I've been doing that for about 35 years, so that's me.
Amazing, thanks Malcolm. Lisa?
Hi there everybody, my name is Lisa Schulteis. I am the founder of ElectraLime Marketing, which is an event planning, management and production company. I also own Your Event Marketplace, which is a global events industry directory, and then I'm also the executive director of the Northwest Event Show in Seattle. So many hats, but enjoy all of them.
Busy lady. Thank you, Lisa. Chris?
Hi folks, lovely to be here. My name's Chris Thompson. I run a business called You.Smart.Thing. That's the only thing I do. Thank God, it keeps me off the streets. So You.Smart.Thing is a travel demand management platform, and we are focused on giving personalised, low-carbon travel plans to visitors and attendees to events of all shapes and sizes, from festivals and major sporting events through to conferences and exhibitions such as this. And what else to say? My background is in marketing technology, so this specific subject of technology and how it can be applied to help essentially save the planet and reduce global warming is, of course, incredibly close to all our hearts, but particularly to mine in terms of how we can apply technology to achieve that end, hopefully.
Thanks, Chris. And then lastly, Saasha.
Hi everyone, my name is Saasha. I'm co-founder of Olio, which is an app connecting neighbors with each other, but also food safety trained volunteers with businesses and event organizers, or event venues, anywhere really that has surplus food, and we can arrange for the safe and efficient real-time redistribution of any surplus food to ensure that no good food goes to waste, and we rescue about 5 million meals a month.
Super cool, really exciting tech on the stage. It's great to be here. So, first question, and this is for all of you really, but maybe we'll start with Malcolm first. In what ways is technology transforming event planning strategies to prioritise sustainability, and what specific tools or software are being utilised to minimise environmental impact of events?
Thanks. We've got a mantra at ILA, which is you can't change what you can't measure, and hence why we've got Trace as a platform. So that's why we do think that one of the best uses of technology is to actually record everything that you're doing, so you can see what your activity is actually generating in terms of carbon emissions. We've just done a temperature check report earlier on this year. We had an event at Q, and it was using the first year's worth of data that we captured in Trace, and we were showing the various different ways in which carbon emissions occur that you might not actually suspect. For example, the big thing that came out is that carpet is particularly bad in terms of material to use. It consumes a lot of energy to create it. It's not very recyclable, not very reusable, and things like that. And also those kind of insights that come out are the things that then enable event planners to think better about exactly how up front you're going to design your event differently. One of the big areas, unfortunately, that we don't have on the platform, because it's very hard to actually measure, is audience travel. We know that's where there's a lot of emissions, and it's a big problem to try and crack. In Trace, we know that the staff accommodation and the staff travel, they're always filled in. Everyone always knows exactly what's going on with that. But audience travel, you know where your audience are coming from, if they've registered, you know where they've come from, their home, but you don't know how they got to your event. And that's really where Chris comes in as well, in trying to really solve that problem. So we've had discussions, for example, about integrations as well between You.Smart.Thing and Trace, so that we can actually have data flowing between all the various different players within the event planning and execution and post-event place. So I think that's really, for me, where technology is, well, certainly how we're applying technology to actually make events more sustainable.
Anything to add, Chris?
Well, no, I'm just second that. I mean, I think your vision of an ecosystem is exactly the right one. And as businesses, I guess we all generate data. As human beings, we all generate data. And I have a phrase which is turning into a cliche from my perspective, but we live in an API-driven economy. And APIs essentially enable computers and data systems to talk to each other. And I think that economy, that API-driven economy that we live in, allows us to share data much more effectively across a myriad of platforms. And I think there are a lot of different vendors here today and solutions providers in the supply chain. It's very true that one size does not fit all. You've all got different roles in different event-driven organizations, and you're going to need different supply chain partners. But getting them to talk to each other effectively, getting them to data share effectively is, I think, a key area where technology can really add value.
Definitely, and data is king, isn't it? Like, we need to start from somewhere. We need to build up as much data as we possibly can in the most accurate and build up robust data to be able to benchmark, to then know how we can inevitably and hopefully reduce as we move on. Anything to add, Lisa?
Yeah, I would say from our perspective, since we're planning, we are trying to bring in technology in a number of different ways. So we have the data that we're trying to find, trying to get that data. I spoke yesterday and I was talking about how hard it is to find that data. Some of those data points are from 2019, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. But for us, we're also trying to bring in different tech into the actual shows themselves. So everything from reducing our print spend and bringing in digital solutions for signage and things along those lines, working with different platforms, we do almost everything we do is hybrid, so working with our platforms to bring that in, our digital floor plans, all of those different elements, everything that we're doing in a show now, we look to see if there is a technology that we can either use to replace or as an add-on to what we're already doing. Because even if we don't replace something, we can use it as an add-on, and then we do get those data points that only the tech will provide that are much harder to actually trace when we're trying to do that manually.
I'm speaking as someone who attends a lot of events, either speaking or as a participant. I often wonder why I'm not asked more information up front about what my plans are. I might sign up and confirm I'm going to attend an event, but I'm really only going to attend 2 sessions on the Thursday afternoon, say. But they've catered, for example, for me for the full 2 days. Or like I never want a pen or a pad of paper, and like why isn't that printed on my name tag as a choice that I've opted out of? It feels to me like there's a real opportunity to get data from attendees at the beginning in order to basically reduce the overproduction or overinvestment. It also reduces costs for the event organizers. And I think a lot of people feel guilty about taking stuff home that they don't actually really want or need, and then they've got a stash of stuff, notepads. I do have actually quite a stash of notepads. Anyway, it seems to me that's one opportunity where technology can help with planning.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a delicate balance there, though, because I think people that work in sustainability are generally happy to give up that level of information and that data because they understand that it's going towards a good use to try and minimize waste, etc. But some people are quite hesitant to give out that amount of data, right? You're nodding, Lisa.
Yeah, we actually had that last year. We are actually, as we're planning for our 2024 show for Seattle, we're looking at what we want to ask, because last year we had a number of questions and we made them optional, thinking, we'll do the right thing, make them optional, take down the barrier to register, all of that crazy stuff that goes through event planner heads. And I would say only 20% of the people actually answered the questions, which was horrible. So now I don't have my data for last year. And so what we're doing this year is we're taking those questions and we're not doing them at registration, but we're putting them in the platform. We're making them required. So even if you want to upload your picture or change your title or anything you want to do in the platform, you're going to have to answer all of the questions, but then we're also incentivizing it. So we're going to tell people, if you go in and you actually do your profile in the platform, you're going to be entered in to win this amazing package with this multi-stay event at the hotel and dinner and all of these things. So we're looking at a different way to ask it. I love that here, when we registered for Event Tech Live and Event Sustainability Live, Adam had those questions in there, right? How far are you coming? Are you staying? Are you going to be here for both days? Are you going to be here for one? So it's just a matter of knowing your audience and knowing when to ask those questions.
Yeah, and communicating why you're asking them, right? What it's going towards.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. And this actually works across. Any time you're asking for anyone to enter data into anything, they won't do it, especially if they don't see any result from it as well. So I think definitely communicating back to the audience at large. You enter this data, these are the things that we did based upon that data, you've helped do X. And I think that can be a self-fulfilling kind of thing to kind of get more adoption. To
echo it again as well, I completely, your point about sort of matching supply and demand and understanding data up front, I think is really key. And the way you incentivize that, I think, is just brilliant. And at least, to your point about incentives and getting people to share their data. I'm sick of surveys. I hate surveys. And you fill in this damn form, and then what is the value exchange? I think we've got to be really clear about offering a really tangible value exchange to people when we're asking them for information. And sometimes, it will help us provide or produce a more sustainable event is enough, but the 20% response rate says actually possibly it's not enough. And certainly, what we're trying to do with travel specifically, and which is our focus, is we're trying to introduce value into that data capture. So rather than saying fill in this survey and tell us how you're planning to travel or how you got to the event, we say here's a really fantastic curated route which is going to give you the best possible event experience, and it actually replaces that interaction with Google or Apple Maps, which is effectively you as an event organizer throwing data away that you could be capturing. manufacturing. So I think it's really important that we introduce that value exchange in a way that really does offer something tangible to delegates and to visitors and to fans and spectators.
Great, thanks, Chris. Right, a new question. Why is it so important to have zero waste events, and how is your technology, in particular Saasha at Olio, how is your technology helping event organisers to achieve that?
Well, when it comes to food waste, nearly 40% of global carbon emissions are directly related to the sort of food supply chain, and a third, if not 40% of all food goes to waste, which means more than 10% of carbon emissions are directly attributed to the food that we don't eat, that we produce. And events are particularly bad at this. 20% of food is sort of the estimate of the food at events that does go to waste. One stat that I always find quite surprising, but it's good to share, is, and it was funded by Zero Waste Scotland 2 years ago at COP, but basically sending 1 kilo of food waste to landfill has the carbon emission equivalent of sending 25,000 plastic water bottles. So just to put things into perspective, plastic's obviously horrible for the natural environment, but it pales. I mean, it's insignificant when it comes to actually greenhouse gas emissions, whereas food is really, really, really bad, and most people just can't get their heads around it. So of course it's important that we all have keep cups and, don't have straws and recycle our lanyards and everything, but a half a sandwich thrown in the bin is, worth many thousands of keep cups or plastic cups. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. My point is, I think it's really important because, for obvious reasons, we need to mitigate the climate crisis. And also personally, I think it's quite offensive to throw edible food away when we have 14 million people living in food poverty. So our solution basically enables any event organizer to pre-arrange for volunteers to collect any unserved or unsold food throughout the event, and then to redistribute that food to the community for free. And we collect from loads of sports stadiums, we collect from the ExCeL Center, O2, we collect from the National Theatre. Basically anywhere there's surplus food, we can match volunteers to make sure that food gets eaten locally.
That's such a great initiative. What an amazing business. Chris?
It's not free though, you do have to invest in it, and I just want to point out, and I think that most people expect a charitable service to be free because it's doing good, but obviously we have to recruit and train and manage volunteers and make sure that that's done safely, and there's a cost associated with that.
It's difficult, isn't it, justifying the ROI in sustainability, and I think that we all get the need to stop global warming and save the planet, but when you're dealing with organisations that have shareholders that expect a quarterly return, it's sometimes a bit difficult, I think, to justify those investments, which is a challenge not only this sector is faced with, but the whole kind of global economy is faced with, really. But why is it so important? I think to avoid waste. Unlike food waste, travel represents just 14%, I think, of the global carbon footprint. Just 14%. However, as you guys may well know, for events, it's typically 80% of their carbon footprint. Typically, there are some fantastic examples where it's a lot less. And that 80% predominantly comes from Scope 3 emissions, those emissions from visitor and audience travel. And so, why is it so important to prevent that waste? Well, we all know that waste, kills the planet. And I think in terms of travel, it's about, again, matching supply and demand, really, and optimizing that. And that might be about understanding your supply chain, about understanding how the production team are accessing a site and exiting the site. It might be about understanding the routes that they're taking. It might be about organizing one lorry instead of 3 and getting suppliers to share a transit service. And equally, I think in terms of either consumer or delegate travel to and from an event, the biggest waste is empty seats, frankly. If you've got coaches or train services that are en route to your event, please fill them, because we've got far too many transit services running around the roads with empty seats. And I think the more you can share data with transport operators and the suppliers to your events, the more you can reduce those empty seats, which is clearly going to have the biggest impact on your event's carbon footprint, given that 80% coming from travel.
Great, thanks, Chris. Anything to add, you guys?
I would just add, for us in the States, it's a little bit harder. I wish we had you. We have, depending on
Happy to come over.
I know, right? Depending on what state you are, giving away food can be incredibly difficult. And there are so many times, we were holding a fundraiser for a homeless population, had all of this food left over, and asked if we could take it because we were actually feeding them that night. And we had to have a very big conversation, kind of do it under the table, right? Because they're worried about being sued and they're worried about somebody getting food poisoning. And we don't have those systems in place that you have in a lot of places.
In the U.S., there's a Good Samaritan law, which absolves any business that donates food from any legal liability.
Right.
It's just not well understood, whereas here, we don't have that law.
Right.
But there's not a fear of litigation.
Right. And there we have it, and whether they know it or not, they're fearful of the litigation. So trying to get the food is it's just ridiculous how hard it is when we have this huge population that just needs to be fed. So it gets a little frustrating sometimes when we look at that food waste and you just want to help and you can't.
Yeah, definitely a flawed system there, I think. Okay, we're going to move on to another question. So how are virtual and hybrid event platforms leveraging technology to reduce carbon footprint of gatherings, and what are the key benefits and challenges associated with these approaches compared to traditional in-person events? Maybe this is one for you, Lisa?
Yeah, I'll take this one first. So for us, the platforms are great, right? Because we can do hybrid or we can do virtual only. And obviously the benefits there are is we don't have the travel, right? We don't have the emissions from the travel. We're meeting people where they are. A lot of times they can't come to events, right? For whatever reason. Maybe it's their schedule, maybe it's their kids, maybe they just don't like to travel. So we're meeting people where they are, and we're able to provide that for them and bring them on. Challenges, obviously, networking, engagement, giving them that experience. We can never recreate a live experience, but being able to give them an experience that is so meaningful that they still want to be part of it, that's always a challenge when you're using a platform. So there's a lot of things that you can do within the platforms to do that. It takes extra thought. It takes knowing your audience and really working with them to make sure that they're having that experience.
Offering a virtual and a hybrid aspect also offers accessibility for those who might not be able to travel for whatever reason but still get to digest that content. And Trace measures both virtual and in-person events as well, doesn't it? Yeah. Do you see much use of that part of the tool?
Not currently, no. So yeah, the hybrid, the online module in Trace is one of the least completed, I'd say. But then again, we're still in the relatively early stages of hybrid events anyway. So I think that probably is just a reflection of that. I do think some of the emerging technologies that are coming up, things like virtual reality headsets, all sorts of stuff like that, can help to make things a bit more immersive for people who are remote. I know, because you're right about like virtual events. I've signed up for virtual events. I go to a few sessions and then I'm going to look at an email or something, or get off on something, and then I kind of realise I've missed other sessions. One thing I saw that was really good, actually, it was good for audience engagement, and I've only seen it on one event, was they actually had a DJ in between all of the various sessions, just playing music and doing stuff and kind of like doing the sort of keeping the audience going, which I thought was really effective, because it actually did engage me and kept me kind of, okay, and there was some discussion and stuff going on onto the next session. So I think there's, we're still in the early days of it. I'd love to see, like they're having, Star Wars, the kind of holograms and things like that. Eventually there'll be some tech like that, maybe 10, 20 years time, who knows, right? Because I think that's the other thing as well, is that, there's something about in person. I mean, even video calls themselves are hard, aren't they? Because there's no eye contact. There's a camera at the top of the screen, you're looking at the screen, it's kind of having a weird conversation like this all the time, isn't it? So I think there are many more technologies going to come up that are going to help with that, and be able to see people's detailed facial expressions and things like that, because that's really one of the things that we miss out by not being in person, isn't it? We are creatures that we watch each other's micro expressions and everything else, and that doesn't necessarily come across quite so well in a virtual environment.
Yeah, we kind of had to pivot towards virtual events and hybrid events over the pandemic, and yes, it's good for the environment for us to be travelling less and delivering less in-person events, but you just don't achieve the same things from a virtual event from a physical one, right?
As the travel guy, I'm going to, fly a flag for meeting up and getting together in person. It's part of human nature, this ritual behaviour, isn't it? Getting together, whether it's a sporting event or a conference or an exhibition or a festival. That said, I absolutely think hybrid events are a core part of the future, and I think if we look at some of the biggest events around the world, they've always been mixed media, right? They've always, you've always got broadcast media, the celebrations, of the FA Cup final that take place in different countries around the world in front of big screens where it's being beamed over to them, and communities are essentially getting together and celebrating or being at one as a community. I think are really great examples of what people in the events industry can achieve on a smaller scale with video conferencing tech and similar. I was at an event like this the other week, and I think one of the panelists, the guy from the energy company, Alex, remind me. I can't hear that, but yes, it was Dale Vince, wasn't it? Was beamed in, and it was brilliant to have such an engaging contributor to a panel like this, just being sort of beamed in from the other side of the UK. So more of that.
Yeah, I think it works particularly well in terms of getting in talented and diverse speakers to participate. From an audience perspective, it's quite easy to have, one or two of the panelists, for example, on the screen. But I would agree, as an attendee, I get so much more. I get digital fatigue in the normal everyday part of my life. I quite look forward to events and having that interaction in real life.
Yeah, you have to get creative. The nice thing is we can bring people in and have speakers, and have that global reach, not only for our attendees, but our speakers. But then you have to get creative. You mentioned the DJ. We did an event once, this is going to age me, and I'm assuming that it actually was a show over here as well as a kid. We had Name That Tune. Does anybody know that show? Please, somebody?
Yes.
Good. So we had a DJ that did Name That Tune on a virtual event, and oh my gosh, it was crazy. Like when the DJ first came on, he was trying to get people involved just with music, and they were just like sticks in the mud. And then he started with the Name the Tune. Oh my gosh, I've never seen people get so competitive online in my life, right? So it's just a matter of knowing your audience, bringing them in, and then, doing something that's unique for them that's going to engage them.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Okay, question. Why should event organisers invest in technology, and what are the benefits for people, planet and profit? I'm going to go to Malcolm first.
Well, because I think it will make economic sense for the future. I do think we're in a kind of the capital phase of sustainability, where people investing now will actually see those investments actually pay off in maybe like sort of 5 years' time, or even possibly like straight away. I was listening to Guy Bigwood yesterday in his talk, and one of his slides he talked about they did a sort of forensic analysis of all of the costs and everything else in an event that they did in the US, and he said and they worked out they spent something like $130,000 on sustainability, but they actually saved about $220,000 in other areas, because once they'd started thinking about the sustainability side of things, rather than just saying, well, that particular thing there, that's going to cost a bit more, then you think, yeah, but over here you're not doing any of that stuff because you're thinking in a more sustainable way. So, I don't know, like rental of laptops or something was one of the things on the list of figures that he had. So I do think that yes, we do need investment, and it will pay off longer term, because ultimately sustainability is really about efficiency, isn't it? And efficiency is generally economically always very good. It just needs some capital investment to get us over the hump and get us into it, and then longer term it will work.
Who wants to go next? Chris?
Don't mind. Do you want to go, Saasha?
With regard to the questions about investing in technology, but where my brain went was that I think that a lot of times investments are made, but then they're not followed through on, so the return on investment is not captured. So for example, you might invest in compostable coffee cup lids, but then you actually don't contract with a recycler that can take compostable coffee cup lids, and they go straight to landfill or a different waste stream, and so you haven't actually realized the environmental benefit, or you don't actually have proper signage to let people know about what they're supposed to do. Meanwhile, you could actually communicate with attendees in advance. Here's the 10 things we'd like you to do that will help to make this event more sustainable, and we're going to let you know how it goes, and circle back and let them know. And so I think a lack of communication, a lack of signage, which is non-tech stuff, just really basic stuff, would actually help to improve the return on investment in either technology or just other sustainability initiatives.
Yeah, similarly, it's kind of understanding the supply chain and understanding that sort of end-to-end life cycle, I think, of products or services or the events that we're doing is really key. I'd sort of jotted my answer down, which flips back to data, which is tech-based, right? But I think data is the answer to everything. I think with it helps us understand supply and demand, and it helps us achieve that efficiency that you were talking about. And if anybody's talking to a senior management team or indeed to investors, if you talk about optimizing supply and demand, you're talking about optimizing your profit and loss, and therefore there's very, very clear return on investment in optimizing supply and demand. And it's that data that helps with sustainability as well. Like I say, whether it's empty seats on a coach or excess food, actually really kind of matching and tailoring the delivery of an event to the audience's needs, which you do so well, is I think really the answer to why we should invest in data capture, understanding it more, and tailoring events accordingly.
And one more question, and this is for everyone, I think. We all know that data is really important. How do we turn the data that we're getting from all of these different activities, all these different platforms, these unique ways of collating that data, how do we turn it into action? There's lots of talk for many, many years about what we should be doing and building up that kind of benchmarking or that baseline data. How do we turn it into action? Malcolm, any ideas?
Well, I think actually, following on from what Chris was saying, once you've got the data, how do you convince a budget holder to spend money in one place and do something better? Data all, I can't remember which, I think it was Twitter or something like that said, if you want to make a change and, bring data, and then we'll listen, because then you've actually got something that backs things up. Because I think a lot of, in the early days of sustainability, it was really kind of, we should do it because it's a net good. And then people say, well, what does that mean? I think that's just kind of sounds a little bit kind of wishy-washy. But once you've got the data, once you've got some solid proof about things, then you can actually start to convince people, particularly people who are used to looking at spreadsheets and numbers and economics.
I was just going to say, and you have to actually use the data.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. I think, from an event planning standpoint, people are really good about collecting data. A lot of the technology collects it for us. We don't even have to ask it to. It just automatically collects it. And then they do nothing with it, right? They don't even review it half of the time. So, working with your events, working with your clients to say, hey, we have this data. This is, let's analyze this and let's see what it's actually telling us and where we can go from here. So I think that's a huge piece of it.
Yeah, I think like Olio, we turn data into actionable insight every day in a different sector. A quick example of that, the biggest event that we've done is the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games, where we provided low carbon travel plans to visitors to that event. We provided those travel plans at the point of a ticket ballot and in the lead up to the event, and we could see from the data that over 50% of people were planning to drive. Not surprisingly, that's the standard default go-to option for going to a major event like that. We also knew that of the 20 different games sites around the West Midlands and including the Velodrome in London, that few of them had parking, only blue badge parking for accessibility. So we really had a challenge, a behaviour change challenge on our hands. And so we used that data to specifically target the people who'd said they were going to drive and say, look, here are your alternative, more sustainable options. Here is the coach service that's been commissioned exclusively for you. Here are the rail services that are most accessible. Here are all the walking and cycling options. And we actually got Transport for West Midlands on board, delivering free ticketing for people with a games ticket. They could also have free bike hire in and around the city. Walking and cycling ended up being 15% of the local travel around the games. So we really used the data to engineer that behaviour.
That's a great example. I use Trace a lot, and I often use Trace to demonstrate to clients or events that I'm measuring to understand what the baseline is, and then work my way through how I can identify what the biggest areas of impact are and what I need to do specifically to reduce them. So Trace is an amazing tool to support with that. Anything to add?
Yeah, actually, and one thing that's a more macro level, another thing that we're doing at Isla is using the data across all the events in Trace, anonymised of course and aggregated, in order to try and drive legislation at government level, because that's one of the other things that's really going to change the landscape for everybody, because it's hard for individual companies to say, well, I'm going to invest in sustainability if my competitors aren't. So, changing government level regulation, that's the way to actually level the playing field for everybody, and then that's a whole kind of big step forward on the sustainability front.
And the temperature check report, I definitely recommend reading to any event managers. It's got some really good benchmark data in there around average amount of waste created per event attendee, lots of really interesting data, and a great example of how it's being used to try and help and push change for the future. I'm going to go to the questions that we've received from the group. So there's one for you, Saasha. Do Olio work with any specific hotel chains? We often run up against strict food safety rules at hotels, meaning event food waste can't be donated.
We work with quite a few hotels, more than I can name here, but happy whoever asked that to chat with you after. But yeah, so we do work with quite a few hotels.
Great, that was a quick answer. Okay, next one. With hybrid events, do you think they'll fully switch to using platforms like Meta rather than streaming as they are now? Anyone have an opinion?
No.
No.
We don't want to allow that to happen, do we? I mean, God love, Zuckerberg and his crew, but it feels a bit stifled, and it feels a bit one size fits all. And I think if there's one thing, hopefully, that we've established is that one size does not fit all. It takes a lot of different players to deliver events, and if we're going to really play to the needs of our audience, just to think that a solution like Meta could be the solution for hybrid events, I think is incorrect. Would you agree, Lisa?
Yeah, my answer is no, for a lot of different reasons, but I think there's also when you get into like even VR and AR and things like that too, and whether people like that option, whether they like having to use the equipment, things like that. I think there's a lot of things that technology enables us to do, but I don't know that we're actually going to fully go there. So.
And also, if we were to do events through Meta, that would mean giving them all of our lovely data.
Information.
All of it. And we want to keep it for ourselves so that we can help develop and grow and improve sustainability performance for our industry, right?
Share it between ourselves, I should say. I would advocate. And I think there's something in that as a sector, and it's something very much, Malcolm, I'd like to discuss with you guys. A data sharing model, a data sharing agreement between key players in the sector would allow us all to be much more informed. And I'm sure we all host customers that go to several of our events, and that information is going to be key for all of us if we can share it safely and securely.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, you guys mentioned the APIs earlier, and I'm a huge advocate of that, but it needs to be easier. I am not a developer. And I currently have a couple of systems right now that they literally have emailed me. They've each emailed me their API information so that I can connect that. I have no idea how to do this, right? So I think with the technology companies, if they can make it easier for us to have that data shared, it would dramatically change the landscape.
Yeah, that definitely needs to happen. It definitely needs to be kind of a button. Yes, I'd like to share my data. Just do it for me. Thank you very much. But in terms of the audience travel side of things, like sharing data. So You.Smart.Thing are very focused on action and helping people to actually make travel to an event in a better, more sustainable way. But when you actually ingest that information into a tool like Trace, then we can see fine-grained audience travel data at scale, and then that means then you can, potentially at a very macro level, you might even consider moving your event to a different location. Because although you can see where your audience has come from fundamentally, from their home addresses to obviously where your venue is, you don't actually know how they travelled there. If you know that they took 2 flights and they did a touchdown in between, and we know that touchdowns actually cause greater carbon emissions from air transport, then that might be something that's really useful and interesting information, which might make you say, well, actually, if we just moved the venue somewhere else, then we can perhaps reduce travel by about 20-30%, something like that, and that's a massive saving in, as Chris said, the largest area of emissions in events, which is physically moving people around.
Yeah, I was at a conference. I was at a winter sports conference in Lausanne. Which was beautiful and amazing, and I got public transport there, Eurostar, I point out. However, what came out of that was location, location, location. And we were talking essentially to sports federations who were hosting, world championships in different places around the world. And the event was attended by FIFA. And you know where the next FIFA World Cup will be held? Across North America in, I think, I'm going to say 9 different cities, it's probably more, with like 3,000 miles in between each of them. So if as a fan you want to see more than one game, your carbon footprint is going to be absolutely huge. I think that sort of thing needs rethinking.
I'm just curious if you've ever seen event registration pricing vary based on taking into account like the fully loaded carbon footprint of that attendee's travel, or if that's something that we might see in the future, like if events are forced, let's say, to buy carbon offsets or invest in carbon reduction technology, and 5% of their attendees are responsible for 50% of their sort of fully loaded emissions, then they might be passing that cost on.
We're in talks with a number of different major ticket vendors about exactly this, Saasha, and dynamic pricing based on the individual's carbon footprint. And the way they're tackling it is by hiking the price and then reducing for good behaviour, as opposed to
surcharging.
Yeah. But I think it's a fascinating area.
Yeah.
Dynamic pricing for events.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons you're starting to see more regional events as well, right? So, IMEX has one in Vegas, has one in Frankfurt, right? We have, the Northwest Event Show. That's a very regional show. We're starting to see more shows that are coming up regionally to reduce that travel, not only for the attendee cost, but also from a sustainability and a footprint perspective. So I think that's what we're going to start seeing probably faster than anything else, is having more of those regional shows.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've probably got time for one more question, and we've got quite a few floating around on the board. A couple are a bit similar, but I'm going to ask this one. How can event technology make the events industry more adaptable in the face of climate change?
I think it has to, right? It's the technology, it's going to give us the data that we need, right? So that we can make those smart decisions and alter our events based on that data. And then also to, really be able to customize the events for our attendees as well, right? So the technology is just giving us more and more capabilities, but it's also giving us more and more information. And that is where I think we're going to start seeing those changes.
What about you, Saasha? Are you seeing that the demand for Olio's services is progressively increasing as time goes on?
It is, although events is a massive opportunity, but it's a tough area to crack because it's often done on an ad hoc basis, and actually for us the upfront cost associated with setting up like one particular event is quite high, and so the cost for the service is quite high. What we need to do, whereas it's much easier with supermarkets or food-to-go chains or office catering, for example, where there's a more consistency in terms of the production of the supply. I think the real push is coming from attendees and individuals who are starting to ask tough questions and want to understand, where they're spending their time and their money, like basically what the impact of their participation is. And so I'm a real believer in individual choice driving ultimately change at the organization or corporate or systematic level. So we are certainly seeing an increased awareness and care for food waste. And a lot of it is not driven by environmental considerations at all. A lot of it is due to a sense of injustice with regard to the cost of living crisis, which people are very acutely aware of right now. And it just feels even worse than it would normally to let good food go to waste.
I guess I have a thought to share quickly, which is I was on a panel recently with a lady called Claire Brigal, who's the CEO of World Netball. And they were faced with a huge problem, which is that many of the territories in which they want to conduct a World Netball Championship are faced with being underwater or at high risk of flooding, because they're coastal places, within the next 10 to 20 years. So how can technology help Claire be more adaptable in terms of World Netball? I think it's a combination of a lot of the things that we've discussed. I would go back to data capture, but one of the things we're talking about hybrid events and being able to broadcast and being able to take people and put people in different environments. I think putting people in different environments is going to be a really key thing, and I think technology can help tremendously with that.
Great. Thank you so much to everyone on our panel. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today, and enjoy the rest of your day. That's us.
Thank you.